So let me introduce myself. My name's Sarah Kendrick, and I'm the clinical director at Mental Health Innovations. We run Shout, which is the UK's first 24/7 text-only service for people in crisis. At MHI, we have a long-standing relationship with the Harry Kane Foundation, and we've been really grateful for their support on a number of key fundraising and awareness campaigns over the years. We work together to focus on building positive connections and showing the ways that people can look after their mental health. And also now I'd like to introduce you to Lucy and her musical recommendations. Lucy is the founder of Bounce Forward. Lucy, would you like to tell us a bit about Bounce Forward and your work?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Thank you. And yeah, welcome everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today on World Mental Health Day. Yeah, Bounce Forward is a charity. We've been around a long time, over 17 years now. And really our aim is to shift the narrative around mental health and to really focus on psychological fitness. We've had a relationship with the Harry Kane Foundation for 3 years now, which has been a wonderful relationship, really focusing on how do we move from, we know how to look after ourselves from a physical point of view, exercise, nutrition, sleep. So what are the equivalents for our psychological health and our psychological fitness? So Bounce Forward's approach is proactive, it's strength-based. Our aim, we have a evidence-based curriculum which is taught in schools. It's been through a 5-year randomized controlled trial, and so our sort of main aim, if you like, is to encourage schools to sort of teach psychological fitness as part of the core curriculum. And then we also work with the adults around children and young people. So at the moment, we've got our Raise Resilience programme for parents, which we've actually had over 18,000 parents go through that course since the beginning of COVID. And we also work with organisations. The adults around children and young people, as you will all know, matter just as much. What the behaviour that we model, the things that we say, really make a difference to their mental health and well-being. So yeah, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And if Sarah, if I may, I would like everybody to just pause for a second and to just think about the impact that you have for yourself and on those around you on World Mental Health Day. Each of us are really important individuals, right? And when you stop and think, I'm not sure how many people are in the room here today. I think there's over 200 people that have signed up for this webinar. Or every single one of those people is making a difference, is making an impact. So yeah, I just wanted to start by, I don't know, thanking you for being you and for being here. And yeah, let's make it a nice session this morning on today, this special day.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lucy. And I don't think there could be a better segue into a message that we have actually from Harry Kane.
Hi everyone, I'm proud that my foundation is working with Mental Health Innovations and Bounce Forward to highlight the benefits of building resilience and meaningful connections for good mental health. While I'm not an expert, I have learned a few things about self-belief and resilience. In this webinar, you'll hear from experts about practical ways to support yourself, develop resilience and build meaningful connections. Having a strong support system is a big part of this. For me, having people I can trust and speak to is crucial. You'll also get guidance on how to look out for someone who might need support, on how to connect with them. You never know the impact it might have. Thanks for joining.
So a bit later, we're going to talk about what connecting with others can do for us and our well-being, and share some tips on how to connect meaningfully with others. But for now, let's have a think about resilience. Harry mentioned it just now. It's a word we hear a lot, and probably all of us have different interpretations of it. So we'll explore that in a bit too. For me, resilience is the capacity to be able to be bent out of shape without breaking. So to adapt, to recover, and to keep moving on, even when circumstances can feel overwhelming. It's not about being unshakable or kind of invulnerable. It's about finding ways to continue despite setbacks, uncertainty, or pain. So Lucy is going to introduce the Slido. Oh, look at this. We've already got, it's already been populated. So Lucy, please go ahead.
Yeah, because we talk about psychological fitness at Bounce Forward, Sarah, and for us that's an umbrella term that includes mental resilience and emotional well-being, and we have a very specific sort of way of thinking about mental resilience. But yeah, I mean, people are already doing it. I think it's quite nice to think about, if resilience were an object, what would it be and why? And it's not just the object that matters, but it's like the characteristics of those objects. So somebody's put cactus. What are the characteristics of a cactus that for you say resilience? And a plasticine, maybe a lot of things that Sarah just was talking about there in terms of sort of malleability and so on. So just give you a few moments. If resilience were an object, what would it be and why? What are the characteristics of those objects that for you speak resilience? I've asked this question, over the years many times to people, and it's always fascinating to me that new things appear. Strength. Metallic thing. What's the characteristics of a metallic thing that for you say resilience? That's an interesting one.
Maybe some metals are sort of bendy, aren't they, and yet very strong.
And I don't know, reflect light. I mean, what I go to is that it reflects light in different ways. Like a metallic, it's not, when you look at it from different angles, you sort of see a different colour in it. And
similar to a diamond. We've got diamond there as well. Very kind of the strongest material on earth, I think.
Yeah, and quite a different idea of a diamond, isn't it? It's just very, as you say, like, there's a permanent nature to it compared to something like, and less malleable. I mean, I know you can work on diamonds, but I mean, they're supposed to last forever, right? Compared to something like, Play-Doh, which is very malleable and you can sort of move it and shape it yourself into all sorts of things. And and again, a rock, a very different sort of sense of this idea of, again, I'll be interested to know what are the characteristics of a rock for this person that would be, compared to something like a bouncy ball, which would have different characteristics to it. What ones jump out to you, Sarah? Well,
I was thinking about this myself, obviously, and I came up with bamboo. I just came up with the first thing because I felt as though I needed something that was kind of rooted in the ground and that was known for sort of being quite flexible and able to sort of move with wind and tide and all of those kind of things. Grows anywhere, grows quite fast. And I think for me, resilience is also about growing after something difficult, if you like. I mean, in therapy, we call it post-traumatic growth. And there's always a possibility for that. So I liked the idea of a tall bamboo that, was very kind of flexible and yet kind of rooted.
Yeah. And I love thinking about resilience in all of those ways, and thinking about it in the context of when things are going well. How can we do more of those things? Because I think often when it comes to, sort of mental health, we can often sort of wait until there's a problem and then think, what do we need to do about this? Whereas I think sometimes for me, and certainly through the research, particularly around children and young people, some academics would argue that children can't sort of display resilience unless they've been through some sort of adverse situation. That's the sort of starting point. And I sort of quite strongly, disagree with that. I think we can develop those sort of characteristics around resilience, and we can use them in the good moments as well as we can use them in the difficult moments, So I always come at things from a sort of a strength, space. What are we doing well, and how can I do more of it? Even in the difficult moments, I think it can be a real sort of a real strategy, you know, sort of take that sort of mindset to it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I was listening to Gabor Mate podcast, and he was talking about post-traumatic growth, and that, you know, we need to kind of know our, you know, the challenges that we've faced in the past, and we need to be able to sort of walk around in those and have compassion for those in order to be able to grow. And I think that's a really interesting point of view, which is slightly different from the point of view that you were saying the research is pointing to.
Yeah, and we're learning all the time. You know, this is the other thing for me about resilience, is that it's not one thing. You know, I've not met, you know, it's not like you sort of get to that point and you have that stamp on your, you know, I am resilient. Like, it doesn't work like that, does it? You know, we have more or less resilience, you know, across our lives. Sometimes from morning till night, we feel more or less resilient. Sometimes it's, you know, over longer periods of time. So I think the idea of that it's not one thing. It doesn't mean one thing or even a collection of things to one person. And what resilience, the way in which I might apply those sort of ideas that we know work, I might apply them in a different way to that you do, and that works for me, and that's okay, and that's good, you know. And I think sometimes that's where, yeah, it's sort of very, on the one hand, it's a very sort of conceptual sort of idea, isn't it? Whereas at Bounce Forward, what we try to do is to get really specific around what do we actually mean? What are the characteristics that we know that if we can grow and develop habits around them, we know that has a long lasting effect on positive mental health, you know, and looking after ourselves in that way.
Yeah. Are there any others that you want to draw out of the word cloud that we have?
I just love looking at it as a whole, don't you? It's just, you know, when you look at all of those words, it's very, I don't know, it feels very powerful. It feels very, very, very malleable and sort of agile. It feels, I don't know. I just love looking at them as a whole. I'd actually really like to get a screenshot of that, actually, because I think it's, I think it's just a nice collection of words around.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I think one that's really struck me is a hand holding yours. Whilst not an object, it's a lovely image and very appropriate, I think, for what we're talking about today. So let's have a think about some of the ways in which we can build resilience. As I just said, as a therapist, I believe that we need to be able to come to a place where we're able to understand what might have impacted our resilience in the past. And if we can gain a compassionate understanding of our own stuff, the events, perhaps the challenges in our past, then that's a really good start. It's Gabor Mate that I was talking about, so do read or listen to him. He has, he's very accessible and lovely to read. But for the present, we should also understand resilience as a skill, right? It's a skill that can be developed. And, you know, you can see some ideas here. Lucy, do you want to pick out some of your favourites here or others?
I mean, yeah, they're all key components. So, I mean, the bottom two I'd like to draw out, really. I think positive emotion is a strategy. Like, for us to know what are the things that allow us as individuals to experience positive emotion, to feel calm, at ease, passive, serene. You know, these. What are the things that I'm doing? What is the behavior? Who's around me? What's the what is it? What's the environment like? And once I know those things, once I know that these are the things, if I put myself into these positions, these are the things that allow me to experience these positive emotions. At that point, they become a strategy. And I can use those strategies in all sorts of different situations. One of the things that we say in our lessons to children and young people who are sort of moving into the exam hall, don't spend the last 10 minutes when you're standing in that queue worrying about all the things you haven't revised. Spend the last 10 minutes doing something that you know allows you to experience positive emotion, to laugh a bit, because you will know much better than me, Sarah, that what's going on in the brain when we're experiencing positive emotions is all of those neural pathways are opening up. We are strengthening our intellectual capacity, our physical capacity, our social capacity, our psychological capacity. So it's really a strategy. And I think we don't think, I talk to a lot of people who sort of wait for positive emotion to happen to them, whereas for me, I want to take charge of it. I want to know what it looks like, and I want to use it in those moments.
I think that's so interesting. One of the things we know from research is that brain architecture does get changed with positive emotion. So the better we can put ourselves, better we can learn what, as you said, kind of engenders that joyous response in us, even mildly happy or content. It's a spectrum of things, right? If we can learn what makes us, let's use happy as a shorthand, then that we're changing our brain architecture, we're learning and we're growing our brains. I think that's a lovely point. And you wanted to mention the other one as well, connection with others in an authentic way.
Yeah, I mean, today's focus, and what better day on World Mental Health Day to think about connection. Human connection is so vital. And I'd be really interested for people who are listening, what you think about this. Please put things in the chat. But I worry that with the growth of technologies, and this isn't a big downer on technology, right? It's, we wouldn't be here all together today if we didn't have technology. So there is, lots of ways in which it's helpful for human connection. But to be able to connect with people in a really authentic and meaningful way, I believe that when we meet each other online, there's something missing from that strength of connection, right? And it's sort of a worry that I have, because I think we are getting to know each other more through virtual spaces, and given that we know, what I know through the research that we've done, that human connection in person, eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder spaces are really important for our overall psychological fitness, our mental resilience and our emotional well-being. And when those spaces are being eroded, and I think they are being eroded right the way through society. I mean, obviously my passion is in children and young people, so even I've just been at the World Wellbeing Policy Movement Policy Forum this morning, and and that's what we're talking about. Tech, the focus is like tech for good. How can we make sure that we use these technologies in a way which doesn't erode the things that are really important for us human beings, and human connection in a meaningful way, not in a superficial, light touch, 30-second way, which is how we all get our information, And so, I'm just really passionate about how do we make sure that we maintain these really important ingredients of human connection as we develop our digital spaces more and more.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, again, sort of rather ironically, because at Shout and Mental Health Innovations, we have projects and interventions that are based online, and a lot of what we're advising people to do is to make connections with other people in real life. Is so important. So for me, it's also about a balance of those things, and not being too heavily reliant on one thing or another. I mean, I think we could probably say that that balance is the key in all things, right? But sometimes quite hard to achieve. And I think particularly for young people who are constantly drawn to social media, it can feel like a quick and easy sort of fix, but it's not a proxy for that other kind of connection that you get when you're seeing real people and interacting with real people. We're going to talk about some kind of tips in a short while.
Could I just add one
Please do.
Sarah, because I know somebody's put in the chat that it's one of the reasons why Shout exists, right? Which is a,
Yeah.
But for me, one of the things that I always say, particularly to those people that are working with young people, but actually this works for everybody. If you've gone a whole day without seeing another human being and spent some time in their presence, like eye to eye, face to face, like in a meaningful way. So it could only be like a minute or a couple of minutes, but if you haven't done that for a whole day, it should be a bit of a red flag that I need to do that tomorrow. And I think just a really simple thing like that is sort of a bit of an indicator, because we know that if we leave that for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, then it can start to become a problem. So yeah, just having these sort of little reminders. Human connection is important. Have I done it today? And have I done it have I given my attention to that human connection in a way which is meaningful and purposeful for me and for the other person? I think it's a really easy tip that we could all just follow.
Yeah, I mean, that is really important, and I think it links, doesn't it, to creating good habits for yourself. Because again, habits, if we're doing things sort of regularly, our brain architecture gets changed. So this is what we mean by sort of building resilience. This is what we mean by building skills. If I can talk about those kind of first two, practicing self-compassion and kindness to ourselves and others. When we face challenges, our first instinct is often, isn't it, to be kind of really critical of ourselves. So often at Shout and in our other work, we hear that people feel like they should be coping better. But actually, if we kind of turn that on its head and think, well, resilience actually grows from kindness and not from criticism.
Yeah.
Then I think, we're on a much better path. There's something about, we talk about being kind to yourself, but we have to think about what that actually looks like day to day. Are you able to forgive yourself? It means giving yourself some care and understanding. And the kind of care and understanding that we would perhaps give to a friend who's struggling with something. Because that way of doing things, reduces stress. It reduces shame, which people often feel when they're struggling with something. And we hear that a lot at Shout, is that people feel ashamed. And then they don't feel worthy of either changing their own mindset or worthy of other people's compassion. So it leads to this kind of circle of shame and self-blame. And kindness towards others also, there's lots of research to back this up, strengthens connection and compassion, which also supports our well-being. So actually being kind to other people has a really big impact on our own well-being. And I know that there are some Shout volunteers, our amazing volunteers, in this webinar, and I know that that's exactly what they'll be aware of. We do a survey every year, and I think it's in the 90% or so of people who recognise that their own well-being is impacted by helping others. Impacted positively by helping others, just to clarify that. And so when we're kind, we remind ourselves that we're part of a community. And again, that's what we're talking about. Community means connection, and that we're not alone in our struggles. There's a common thread there, which feels really important, because we can feel very isolated. And the second one, express gratitude. I didn't used to kind of believe very much in expressing gratitude, but I found it to be really, really powerful, because when I intentionally focus on what I am thankful for, even if it's small things, I notice a sort of a rebalancing, rewiring of my brain, which helps me to notice other positives sort of further down the line. For example, I went for a walk yesterday morning, and there was this amazing, there were trees in just different colours, autumnal colours. And it was set against a bright blue sky, which it isn't today. It's very grey today. And that felt to me so amazing. And it just lifted my mood. And it made me kind of, a bit further down, I started chatting to a woman about her lovely dog. You know, for example, you know, it helped. So it helped me connect. It opened something up in us, gratitude.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, I perhaps avoided it for a while because I felt as though it was a sort of an American import. Sorry, Americans. But, you know, it didn't feel kind of authentic. But if I think that it's about just noticing things that look wonderful or feel wonderful, then it really changes my mood and how I feel. So gratitude, really important. If we're just to sort of sum up, I guess, on resilience, it doesn't come from being tough all the time, I would say. It comes from being real, staying connected, and being compassionate. And all of these things here can help us to navigate life's challenges, which we are all navigating. We will all navigate grief, loss, and change in our lives. And they might just help us to recover more quickly when things go wrong. And Lucy, you know, what you said about sort of, you know, doing it regularly and you know, making it a habit, I think feels really important with these.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, the bit I would just pull out of your summary, Sarah, to reinforce would be resilience is absolutely about recognizing when you need to stop doing something. Resilience is absolutely about being able to understand this is a tough moment, you know, or a tough day or a tough period. And so I need to do some extra things to be able to look after myself during that time. We have so many sort of, I don't know, visions of resilience out there, which is about sort of keeping going and bouncing back. And, you know, and all of that is true. And resilience is also, and I think the more of us that we can build into that narrative that, you know, I'm being resilient today because I've recognized I've just had, you know, 2 days that are full on. And unless I take proper recovery for me, you know, maybe using positive emotion and gratitude and some of these things to be able to do it, I know that that is going to have a knock-on effect. There is a, you know, a psychological term called allostatic load, which is basically the idea that we are keep on stacking things on. And at the point we get, you know, the famous thing is, you know, the straw that broke the camel's back. That's a psychological term that we're just taking on too much. So, you know, I love in your summary that resilience is absolutely not about this sort of tough and keeping going. You know, it's almost the complete reverse of that. You know, yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. Yeah.
Remember,
this is the reason why I got into this work. You know,
yeah.
I sat in a conference about, well, I'm showing my age, but about 25 years ago, I think it was now. And this head teacher said, we do 2 things at our school. We teach our children responsibility and we teach them to fail well. And I remember sitting in that audience thinking, oh my goodness, if only someone had told me at school that you could fail well, because I would have been an A-star student at it. And I wasn't an A-star student at anything else, by the way, but I would have been an A-star student at failure. And, you know, and fast forward, you know, now to 2025, where I think this idea of perfection and striving for perfection all of the time. And, you know, and it's easy to think about young people in this space, but I want to just stop a minute and think about how often what bar have you set yourself, you know, to reach on a, you know, it's impossible to sustain this perfection idea. However, you know, we think, you know, over a period of time, sometimes just doing things good enough is good enough. And it's not only sometimes, you know, it's what we need in order to be able to keep going. So you know, I love that idea, and you know, and who has ever been successful in this world in any way, shape, or form that has not failed? And I think we ought to celebrate failures. I think we ought to have awards for failures. You know what I mean? Like I think we ought to reframe how we think about failure, because it's part of the journey. but perfection is sort of out there as the we ought to be sharing loads more images on social media of us when we're in our, with our, looking not perfect and not wonderful, and and celebrating that.
Yeah.
I and we have to do that ourselves. One of my sort of strengths is integrity, and so it's hard for me sometimes to dial my integrity down, but I've got to sometimes in order to look after myself and to be able to keep going and taking that step forward. So yeah, what would you add, Sarah, to it?
I think that I think about the sort of the world that we live in, and that there are so many pressures to to do more or to be more or somehow to have everything worked out, and when we just strive for that, we're in a way setting ourselves up for constant disappointment, really. But the concept of good enough, I do find really interesting. It's a concept that is very close to my heart because it comes from psychotherapy, and it comes from the concept of good enough parenting, which is often a sort of a place for people feeling as though they should be perfect, as if they're going to let their child down. And actually, it teaches us that letting your child down is an important learning for your child. But so when we can just allow ourselves to be good enough, there's room again. There's that growth word. There's room again for growth, and there's room for balance, and there's room for self-compassion. I hope that makes sense. We need to create a bit of space in all of this sort of perfection, for slightly ropey sometimes, and because that is how most people experience themselves. Don't believe the hype.
But a lovely quote in the chat, Sarah. She said one of her favourite quotes is, "The master has failed more times than the beginner has ever tried."
Gorgeous.
The master has failed more times than the beginner has ever tried. It's again, it's that that sense of growth, and I've got to keep going, and I've got to.
Yeah, I'll take that. That's wonderful.
Yeah. I might just say as well. Sorry, I've just noticed Sarah's. I must just shout out to Sarah Howson. Actually, she the Strategic PA Network is a wonderful network of personal assistants who work in all sorts of wonderful organisations. But Sarah's network brings them together, and for me, I would describe it. Sarah might describe it in different ways, like really empowering individuals to be the best versions of themselves. And she was just saying at one of their networking events, which is all about human connection and bringing people together in a really meaningful way. She adores the idea that it's about giving her as much energy and positivity about what she's learned, as well as what they're also offering out to that group. So it's just that lovely, way of learning and growing together, and all of the things that we've been saying, really. So yeah, I'm just pulling out some of the brilliant comments going in the chat. Why far too many to talk about all of them, but yeah.
Well, that's wonderful, Lucy. Keep those coming. That's great. Because we're going to talk about how meaningful connections help boost our well-being. I mean, Lucy, you will know that there's a load of research around physical health advantages, mental health benefits, purpose and growth. Can you share something from your work about meaningful connections or your life, and the importance of them?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I want to start on a flip side here, right? We all know that connection is important, and we all know that a problem shared is a problem halved, but we know that. And I also think that we ought to recognise that sometimes connection, speaking out, sharing our challenges is really difficult. And again, I would ask people to just sort of stop and think about this for yourself, right? For me, when I'm really feeling vulnerable in some way, it's much easier for me to do what I call my hedgehog, which is to go on the inside, put all my prickles on the outside so nobody comes anywhere near me. And the main reason for two main reasons for that. The first is I sort of don't want to burden anybody else with my challenges and difficulties. It's actually quite difficult for me to do that, something I know about myself. But the second and the real reason I find it hard is that if I do reach out and tell somebody what's going on for me, I'm sort of seeking help, and they don't deliver back what I need, I'm then even more vulnerable, because I've usually reached out to somebody that I trust or respect or that I love, and then they're not able to deliver back what I need. So it's sort of an easier get out clause for me to do, So meaningful connection to me is about sort of half of it, if you like, is about self-awareness. How do I understand myself and what's going on for me? And am I able to understand it enough that I'm able to articulate it? It's one of the reasons why at Bounce Forward we use very well known in therapy science, a cognitive behavioural model, the CBT model, because for us it offers a language framework. If I don't like the way that I'm feeling and the way that I'm behaving, and I know that there is a direct link between what I think and how I feel and how I behave, and that I'm able to sort of slow that situation down and sort of separate out what's happened from what I believe to be, what I've told myself about that situation, the story my brain's telling myself at that point, and how it's sort of how I'm feeling and behaving. I'm able to slow that down and sort of look at my what I'm thinking. What we notice through that often is that, and you mentioned it earlier, often the things that we tell ourselves are often very negative. They're mostly not even completely true when we're feeling, I've really messed up here and it's all my fault and, nobody's there. They're often not completely true. We have inaccurate sort of thinking. So the idea for us about using that sort of cognitive behavioural model is providing a language framework that first of all allows somebody to be able to think, to create that self-awareness about what's actually going on for them. And then they're able to articulate it to somebody else in a way which feels safe, which allows me to stop being quite a hedgehog, because I can say to somebody, look, can I just spend 10 minutes with you just describing to you what I think is going on for me? And here's what I'd like you to do to help me. Might just be to listen, might be to give me some advice, might be to, to shake me up a bit. But I can be really clear about that. And so I've got this sort of language framework that allows me to understand myself and to connect in a way with somebody in a really helpful way for me and for them. And I think that is a really important and crucial component to meaningful connection and and some of the other things on there, that idea of feeling lonely. Partly it's because I don't feel like I've got like the vocabulary or the way to sort of, to sort of connect with somebody else around it.
And that's a really interesting point, that last one, about, sort of understanding what you need. Would you, if you're talking to somebody else, perhaps ask the other person what they need to help them to reflect?
Absolutely. Sometimes people don't know. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? When you say to somebody, what do you need? And you're particularly in those times when and again, I think about this for myself, when I'm really in a hole, sometimes I don't quite know what it is. But the idea of being able to at least sort of start that conversation in a way where I feel like I've got safety around it, like I've got some control over it, because I've said I only want to talk to you about this for 10 minutes and then I'd really like us to stop, so having that sort of safety, which again, I'm sure the environments through shouts and the services that are offered through the the mix and so on through your services offer that sort of safe environment, which gives people the permission to be able to say some of this stuff out loud. But for me, the language framework is really important in it, because that's part of what creates the safety for somebody in order to be able to connect in a way which is helpful for our well-being. They're so interconnected,
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're both saying is that having some sort of understanding of your own style, particularly, when you're in a hole or, when things are difficult for you, is really helpful then in in being able to connect, because it's such a common thing that you know, when we're having a hard time, that we'll tend to turn in on ourselves, and not access the kind of support that's probably there for us. So it's then that we need to think, right, okay, I do need to do this because I need to take this step. I need to really look after myself here and make a connection with somebody.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about all of the sort of, you know, the benefits that we know about. So strong relationships can help reduce anxiety and depression. There's research on this. And of course, increase resilience when life gets tough, which is what you were talking about. And supportive people, if they listen well, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, can help us to reframe negative thoughts. Sometimes we find this at Shout and at the Mix, that when people are able to, and in our case at Shout, type out in a text how they're feeling, it does something to your brain which helps you it calms your parasympathetic nervous system, kind of activates, and you're able to think again. So that connection can actually help us to regain our thinking in moments of crisis or moments of anxiety or moments when we do feel like a hedgehog, or in my case, a tortoise. You know, it's a bit about self-knowledge, but it's also about understanding that other people are really unlikely to experience you as a burden. And I could talk about burdensomeness for you know, for some time. It's a very common factor in terms of, you know, the people that we see who are reaching out for support for our services. People feel like they're not worthy of getting support or even having connection. So it's really important. One other thing I just would like to kind of raise is that there's a biological kind of response that happens when we connect with other people. You will have heard of oxytocin, which is commonly kind of talked about with newborns and when they're breastfeeding. But positive interactions stimulate oxytocin it's the bonding hormone in all of us, which promotes calm and trust. So if we can get somebody to a sort of place where they're feeling calm and they're feeling connected, then they will feel less burdensome and they will feel more bonded with you. So what are some of the signs that someone might need support? What would you say on this one, Lucy?
I mean, the thing for me around this is that, you know, from Bounce Forward's point of view, is that sometimes this can be difficult. Like, you know, so I always think about, you know, looking at what does it look like when somebody doesn't need support? Like, you know, how would you say somebody doesn't need any support? When are they doing well? When are they, you know, sort of thriving and so on? But, you know, for me, if you go back to the idea of like meaningful human connection and your point you just made about, you know, we've got different people in our lives, and most people, if you reach out to them, would want to be able to help you if you could. And so, you know, I think some of those things that you might just notice in somebody can sometimes be really, really small, insignificant type things, and sometimes they can be you know, quite big things. But for me, what comes back to habits, if I've got good habits that I'm sort of spending good quality human connection time with people, that I'm interested in what's going on for them and what makes them experience positive emotion and excites them and gives them, you know, and what their strengths are and all of these things, that if I'm expressing an interest in some of those aspects of a person, by the very nature, it will bring up the idea of the things that are perhaps not going so well. But for me, within the context of a sort of more sort of strength-based role in it, you know. But I know from your because we work more in that sort of proactive, preventative space, you know, I would always come at this of, starting from a space of you know, of what's going well. And actually, one of the things that we know through our research is that if you think somebody is struggling, right, you might not know, but if you think somebody is struggling, one really good thing that you can do is ask them to do something for you. Now, not to burden them with some big thing that they can't do, but to ask them for a bit of advice, or to say, like, you know, I just need your input on this, or what would you, this is my situation, what would, I know that you're really great at this stuff, what would you do? Sometimes that you know, that idea that we like, that can be like a really reminding that person that they have something to offer back to you, and that you know, that you need them, and so therefore, if I, you know, so yeah. Not, I think you might answer this question better than I would, Sarah, from the context in which it's been shared. So yeah, please. Well, what would you say to this?
Well, I think it is really important to, you know, to think of it from the kind of the strength side. And there are undoubtedly times, though, when people will struggle, and they will struggle quite severely. And I think you were spot on at the start of what you said, when you said that, you know, sometimes you can't tell. Sometimes it's really, really hard. So my best advice would be just ask. But sometimes we pick things up that aren't, you know, that we can't actually put our finger on. Oh, you know, just the way somebody did something, or, you know, that seemed to not quite be the way they might normally do it. So it's about, you know, that changes that you pick up, and please don't be afraid to ask. I will often talk to strangers about, you know, if I see somebody distressed, you know, when I'm out and about, I will always ask. And I have never, ever had anybody tell me to, you know, sling my hook. You know, I have only ever had really positive responses. So it's always okay to ask, and it's always okay to try to engage with something. It might not always work, but actually just doing that sometimes for somebody, and saying, and when you're ready, I really do want to kind of listen and understand how you are, you know, is really important. So I hope we've kind of covered both kind of aspects of that here. So you know, this is an interesting one. This is about, you know, what skills do we need to build meaningful connections with each other. If I just go through these, so showing someone you're ready to listen. We talked about compassion, and I talked just now about always asking, and there are certain things that you can you know, that you can do, like, you know, I call it proper listening. Which means listening with compassion, or active listening, if you like. There's no need to interrupt or to share your own stuff at this moment. Just allow the person to talk. Sit somewhere that you don't have to look at them if they don't want to look at you, because that's not a prerequisite of building a meaningful, you know, connection. Everybody has a different style, different way of communicating. So tell them that, you know, that you're ready to listen to them. You can actually say that, you know, I'm here and I'm ready to listen to you. What would you, you know, what would you like me to know? What's happening for you? So ask sort of open-ended questions. So that's the what and the how questions. And indicate that you're following them. I mean, even if it's just, oh, okay, yeah, and was there something else on that? So, and you can clarify things, and you can say, I know this is really hard for you. It's okay, I'm listening. So keep the space open for them. And then the fourth one on here is check in more than once, which means, you know, don't just let, if somebody's, you know, in a difficult place and you've had a conversation with them, don't just let that sort of drop. Check in with them. Send them a text the next day and say, I was just thinking about our conversation yesterday and wondering how you are. Would you like to have another chat? So really important that you sort of keep that thread, because as we were saying before, and I don't think that the image of the hedgehog is going to leave me, Lucy, but we can tend to close down, so we can reach into that space a little bit to try and facilitate it. I don't know what your thoughts are, Lucy.
Well, and I agree with everything 100%, Sarah. And I also think, like, particularly number two, I mean, all of these things matter for us when we're talking to ourselves as well. And for me, what questions, asking myself, what was the most important part of that for me? When somebody tells you something, and you might say, well, why did that happen? Or why did you feel like that? Straight away, there's a sort of a judgment that comes when you ask somebody why. And so what you do is you defend it. You say, well, because, when you say to somebody, what was the most important part of that for you? Or what does that mean to you? Inadvertently, what you are saying is, I'm here and I'm listening. I care about what's going on for you. And I'm not trying to do anything else but to be present and to be listening and to allow you to articulate and to say out loud whatever it is. And if you think about just switching, if someone says, well, why did that matter to you, compared to what was the most important part of that for you, straight away you go from it's a very internalizing type question, hugely powerful. We have a set of 3 questions that we teach to children and young people and we actually say to teachers and to parents, and it's actually, if you don't know what's going on for the other person, so they're telling something to you, just to say to them, so what did that mean to you, will really bring to life almost what's in the other person's head, like what they're thinking about the situation. And yeah, it's a really powerful way of, without saying it, to say, I care and I listen and I want to know about you. So much in our communication, what we're really doing is listening, ready to give our answer. Like, we're not truly listening to each other. So for me, out of all of these, if we can use what and how open questions, as you say, more often, more meaningfully, I think that's about strengthening our connection, strengthening the idea that we are here for each other and we care. We're listening and we care.
And this way of communicating, it takes practice, doesn't it? I mean, because we all have a tendency to, just in general conversation, sort of lob our own views in all the time and that kind of thing.
Desperate to tell you what, I'm doing it myself there, like, modelling it, I'm desperate to tell you what I think. Yeah. It often comes from a really good place, right? It's not because we're doing it because we there's something about, like, wanting to repair, like we have this natural desire to want to repair, don't we? And to make things okay,
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't.
Yeah, we can't rescue other people, but we can be alongside them when they're having difficulty and when they're in distress.
Yeah.
So this is something for, sort of a reflective kind of space, really. If you can take a moment to reflect and think about a time when you experienced failure, not in a way that, was really terrible for you, but think about a failure that taught you something valuable. And think about what you learned about yourself in that moment and how it helped you grow. And then, connecting that reflection with what we've discussed today, how do you manage to think about yourself in moments of challenge? Do you practice self-compassion, gratitude? Can you allow yourself to be good enough? These habits strengthen your resilience and help you to recover from setbacks. Lucy, do you want to add something?
I mean, for me, you said it earlier, Sarah, a massive message for me is to make these habits, like, these are things that we should be reflecting on all, not all the time, but like regularly, and what's regular for you will be, that works regularly for you will be different for me, right? But just the idea of being able to think about, these are tips and strategies and things that we know through the research and evidence over many years from different environments that do make a difference. But are we doing them? Are we creating those habits? Are we building them into our everyday? Okay, we know we've got to go for a 30-minute walk. what is the equivalent for our psychological well-being, our mental resilience, and our emotional well-being. And so having a reflection sort of thing around this, about your failures and about, you know, some of the things that we've talked about today, about meaningful connection and listening with empathy, and, you know, using what and how questions, and, you know, are really, and are you walking the walk? You know, are you displaying that behavior to those around you? You know, I think we can all really make a difference by modeling the behavior that we want to see in each other.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. You know, modeling is slightly undersold too, isn't it? And it's really important. It is how we learn from each other. And I love that, you know, your tip being, you know, you need to walk the walk. I would say that mine is, you know, to give yourself permission to be human, to be imperfect, to be still growing, and to still be worthy of connecting with other people, because of all of those things.
Yeah.
So we are going to just talk about further support. So Lucy, if you can remind us about Bounce Forward and how people can access you.
Well, the one big thing, so we have the Harry Kane Foundation have funded 4,500 places on our parenting course, which is called Raise Resilience. If you go to our website, so bounceforward.com, and on the front, on our homepage, you will see a picture of Harry. And if you click on his picture, it will take you to the Raise Resilience courses. Some of them have already started, but it doesn't matter. We still have places on some of them. It's a virtual space. There's 6 sessions for parents, and they also receive resources and tools to use at home with their children. As I said before, we've had over 18,000 parents go through these courses. They're a really wonderful space for parents to come and just think about what psychological fitness, what mental resilience and emotional well-being means for them and for their children. And because they're recorded, as long as you're registered, the parents will all get the recording at the end. So we have parents say, "Oh, I couldn't make it tonight," which it's fine, because you get the recording afterwards. So there's that. And then, you know, for anybody that works with schools, we have, you know, evidence-based teaching and learning resources in different ways, which can be embedded in schools at both upper primary school and secondary, and into young adults in college and university as well. So if anybody's got those connections and has got schools that they would like to sort of nominate for us to work with, please get in touch with us. And just bounceforward.com has got our contact details.
Great, thank you. And for MHI, check out our sister service, The Mix, and our channels for. We have a new life skills self-paced learning module which is launching soon, and that's focused on resilience. So, you know, self-paced thing, you know, free to access, and that's in collaboration with the Harry Kane Foundation. Our good friend at MHI, and I think Lucy also met him this morning, Ben West. Do follow him on Instagram. I am Ben West, and he's just posted something about being at the football last night with Harry Kane, and also mentions the life skills suite of learning that we have. Just remains to say thank you so much for joining us. Apologies for going over slightly, but, you know, I did want us to be able to kind of share everything we had with you. Lucy, would you like to say goodbye to?
Yes, thanks so much it's lovely to meet you, Sarah. I've not met you before we had this webinar set up, so it's really lovely to meet you and to spend time with you. Thank you for all the knowledge that you've shared, and that, you know, not only in the today but in the build up to it as well. Thank you so much for that. Somebody's asking in the chat whether the recording is going to be sent out. I believe it will be sent out to everybody that's registered. And yeah, just thank you so much for your time and coming, you know, spending the hour with us. And please remember to walk the walk and look after yourself today and over the weekend.
Wonderful.
And always, actually.
Thanks so much, Lucy. Thanks, everyone.